Welcome. And here is Samson's take. OSP officers fighting corruption on empty stomach. In November 2020, respected anti-corruption crusader Martin Amidu resigned as a special prosecutor. In April 2021, Kisi Ejabing was nominated. He was vetted for the job by Parliament in July and sworn into office the next month, 5th August. He was not paid salary in 2021. He worked. He was not paid salary in 2022. He kept working. And there is no indication he and his staff will be paid this or the next month or in 2023. The people hired to catch the thieves and recover stolen money are denied resources and starved for a cumulative 17 months. Surprisingly, the OSP continues to give us hope that the broad day rape of the public purse won't continue without consequences. In its latest move, it has put 3 officers of the Northern Development Authority, NDA, and a businessman before court to explain how a 5.7 million consultancy contract mysteriously turned into 10.4 million cedis. It follows a petition by Martin Pebu, who brought the bizarre scandal to public light on Newsfile last year. A petition by the president's own appointee, the former head of the NDA, Dr. Alhassan Suleimana Anamzoya, who fought the rot, sat on the president's desk for months without action. And this compelled Martin Pebu to accuse the presidency of complicity for the several months of inaction. In December 2022, the president dismissed the 2 deputy CEOs who are now facing criminal charges together with the CEO himself. It is curious why he, the CEO, was not also sacked or at least suspended. The OSP has ended the rot at the port that denied the state tax. The GRA's discretionary discount regime on values of goods and vehicles was blatantly abused and became a tool for corruption, as found in the OSP decision in the LaBianca case. Yes, this is the OSP that will even chase a dead man, a ghost, found to have own state property that cannot, by law, be sold or gifted to anybody. How can you feel proud that for 17 months you have not been able to resolve this issue to pay them their salaries? What do you gain unleashing communicators paid by the taxpayer and blind party loyalists to attack the SP because Minority Leader Haruna Idrisu did his job in disclosing this to the public? By law, the SP's conditions of service are those of a justice of the Court of Appeal, and his staff are ranked as the police and allied security agencies. What you should be explaining to citizens is whether they have asked to be paid anything beyond what they are entitled by law. So please, stop the uncritical propaganda that the SP has rejected 20,000 cedis salary and has appointed members of his law firm. The fact is that all staff appointed there were lawful. They were approved by the OSP board, and only one person comes from the the SP's law firm. The fact is that they reject salaries below equivalent officers in the police service. It's a special entity. And what you're seeking to pay them is contrary to the law's prescriptions. It took 9 months after his appointment for government to constitute the OSP's board. His crime was to fill only 3 out of the 7 critical offices to enable him work. Someone would have gone to sleep and wait until you fully furnish the place. These were later approved, as is the case with new entities. This is a specialized and new office. It deserves special attention. It does not have the resources that the long-established agencies like the Yokos have, and therefore must not be compared with those when considering its budget. Let's empower this promising office financially as it demonstrates readiness to make corruption an expensive venture and is already helping the state to recover badly needed money in millions of cedis. Just pay Kisie Jabing and his staff what they are due by law. This office has what it takes to quickly gain financial independence, because under the law, it is to retain 30% of the stolen money it recovers, 50% goes into the consolidated fund for all of us, 10% is to be spent on whistleblowers and informants that it will use or engage, and the remaining 10% goes to the Attorney General's office to assist that place. That is my take. Resource the OSP. Pay them to work. Let me welcome my guests to the studio and those who are joining us via Zoom so that we can begin the discussion. My guests joining us for the first segment of the discussion, which will be very brief, will be convener, Individual Bondholders Forum, joining us by Zoom, Senyor Husi. Dr. Theo Champong is economist and political risk analyst, also joining us by Zoom. When we get to the COVID-19 fund accounting matters and the NDC's reshuffle, Kofi Adams is MP Boem and member, Public Accounts, Defense and Interior Committees of Parliament. He's in the studio. Sylvester Tete is MP Botiano, English Yamanfrom, and Vice Chairman, Communications Committee of Parliament. Suleiman Ibrahima is Executive Director, Media Foundation for West Africa. He joins us via Zoom. This show is brought to you by the candid sponsorship of Bank of Africa, as strong as a group and close as a partner, MTN everywhere you go. Ashesi University, educating ethical and entrepreneurial leaders for Africa. Robert & Sons Optical Services, your comprehensive eye care service provider for 31 years. My Way Insurance, simply dial *165# on the MTN to join. And St. Thomas Eye Hospital, providing excellence in eye care. We'll be right back to deal with the vexed matters.
Once we all acknowledge that this debt exchange program is important for us to get a move from the SLA into an F-fund board decision, then the question becomes, how do we, quote unquote, burden share in the process? And how do we also acknowledge the idiosyncratic livelihoods of people versus the balance of the fund program? And so that's what we will seek to do before the end of the program, and for at least 80% of us to join it. And I'm confident that we'll be able to harness that.
The concern is that, well, will this thing be extended again?
No, I don't think so. I'm confident that we'll get there. You know, we have done the staff level agreement, as you know. We met with the Paris Club membership, and we have given them till end of February for us to go through what we call the common framework, or some version of it, but that should be facilitated. And then we expect them to go to board in Washington in March. So really, we don't have that type of time.
I personally look at the problem and what has been proposed. and thought as follows. Probably the starting point would be to establish what those debt obligations are in the first place, which of course I'm sure are very well known to government, the base on which they've structured this proposed solution. Once we define clearly what our debt service obligations are, then the next step to actually take is to look critically at government expenditure and government revenues to see what can be done to enhance our debt service capacity. And as I said in an article I wrote recently, we should begin to look closely at our expenditures. What expenditures can we cut out? Maybe new, not very essential capital projects. What can we suspend? Ongoing, maybe very necessary capital projects.
Right. So you heard the finance minister in that exclusive interview with George Wiafe on PM Express last week. And then you also heard Togbe Afede, who has sufficient experience in this area of finance and economy. Also, he was appealed to by the individual bondholders, just like the Catholic Bishops' Conference. They also issued a statement yesterday asking that things don't seem to be right. In a part of the statement, they say, in the light of what is happening, we are troubled that the position so far adopted by government lacks consensus, resulting in the strong reactions witnessed in the recent past. And they make some recommendations. They say to win the international community over in pursuit of this, government must present a posture that is consistent with the fact that the country is in dire straits or crisis. These include, but certainly not limited to, avoiding the reported expected expenditure overruns in the 2023 budget, drastic government expenditure control by reducing the number of government appointees, the part that the president doesn't want to hear, suspending non-essential projects, and a review of the free SHS policy. And then they say, while we expect government to consider these suggestions, we humbly appeal to Ghanaians to appreciate the current economic situation and understand that there will be difficulties in the coming month while the problem is solved permanently. I'm reading from a statement issued by the National Catholic Secretariat, the Catholic Bishops' Conference, and is under the hand of Most Reverend Matthew K. Jemfi, Bishop of Siani and President of the Ghana Catholic Bishops' Conference. So, not speaking any different language from Togbe Afede and many others that we have heard. Let's bring on Senior Hosi and Dr. Theophilus A. Champong on the latest development. Thank you, gentlemen, for making the time to join us. As we know now, the Ghana Association of Banks, they have signed on. They signed on the 23rd of January. Ghana Insurance Association, they signed on the 26th of January. The Securities Industries signed on the 27th of January. The only group left is the individual bondholders that is seeking a complete no deal. How do you proceed, Senor? Okay, let me, please unmute your mic.
All right, very well. We're privileged to have met the minister yesterday, and we foremostly wanted to congratulate him as well as discuss our issues. I mean, the progress he's made so far is fantastic. Do we need a DDE as an economy? It's one of the options that's on our table. And achieving the DDE would also definitely help us attain the sustainability that's required and help trigger the reforms or the transformation of our economy. So conceptually, we are not opposed to the DDE in principle. What we have argued is that extending that to individuals is what actually going to be economically catastrophic, socially unsustainable. And I don't even want to talk about the politics related to it. And these are the reasons. While you have the banks, the insurers, really sit down in this entire pool of investors and having these negotiations with government, because they are structured entities, government has actually put in insulating mechanisms to help them recover. So there's a financial stability fund. There are forbearances that have been granted them by the central bank. There's a reduction in their capital adequacy ratio, their cash reserve requirements. All these things help them recover. Unfortunately for individuals, there's no option like that. So your only recovery is for you to really hit the floor really hard and pray you survive, which is not something that's sustainable. What is even more critical is the savings culture and investment culture in the country. For every economy to really thrive, it really needs savings to grow. Every economy has households, and by that extent, we are talking about individuals, as the primary source of loanable funds. It is not the firms, it is not government. Firms and government actually take money from the economy to run the wheels of the economy. Households provide money into the economy. So when you crush the confidence of households or individuals in investing in the economy, you're actually going to be transforming this crisis into a very big economic crisis. We've been claiming that it's more like a fiscal crisis because it's something that's happening on government's expenditure and revenue side, but it will cascade into something that's more unsustainable. That is why we must protect this particular subsector. There are no structures for it, and when you crash the confidence, you have a problem. I'll give you an example before you possibly just come in. The auctions that we are having now for our treasury bills that's supposed to fund government short-term needs are failing. They are failing. Why? People have lost confidence in government's financial instruments, and more importantly, in the entire financial system. People want to take out their money and keep them under their pillows. People want to convert them into dollars and keep them in a safe. That will kill the economy. And that's why we must protect this economy by keeping individuals out. And I think that's been said.
The bottom line of the of the report of the Government of Ghana Individual Bondholders Forum Technical Committee on the exclusion of individual bondholders from the Domestic Debt Exchange Program. The report is dated the 25th of January 2023. And I find that you are a signatory representing the convener of the Individual Bondholders Forum, and then Mr. Samuel Akest is a director with the Ministry of Finance. The conclusion of that is what? That you have presented to the minister or government and expect them to comply with or to use to exempt individual bondholders?
What the committee really did was first to really appreciate what government challenges were and also to explore whether individuals can actually help solve the problem. What we had recommended we had proposed in our initial petition to the minister indicated we didn't think we should be part of it. But we also told the minister that we have policy capacity to help him navigate the entire challenges. So we filed our recommendations, and these recommendations were reasonably vetted and largely considered very reasonable by the entire committee. And that's been tabled. Yesterday at our meeting with the minister, he was very grateful for the inputs that were made. And actually, if I should quote him, he said, this is something Ghana must definitely do. So there are options to this entire challenge, but he needs to also deal with short-term issues, and that's why he thinks restructuring the debt may help, which we don't oppose.
You gave as many as 18 recommendations, is it not? My question is,
absolutely,
what is central
actually
for you?
20.
What's the bottom line?
Actually 20 recommendations.
Okay.
There were two more which were not part of the expenditure and the revenue. We had them as other recommendations.
So what is central in your recommendation that must lead to the total exemption of individual bondholders?
Largely the creation of fiscal space to service government debt. If we can actually create 83 billion let's say we are even going to probably realize 50% of that. That in itself is the biggest contribution that anybody could make to this entire exercise. The banks are not going to make that contribution. Insurance will make that contribution. If government's fiscal decisions on revenue, expenditure, and the other interventions that we recommended, even be able to achieve 50% of that, it's one of the biggest wins that they have. And I think that it's something that is clear, doesn't re-emphasize the need for individuals to participate in this entire exercise.
Right.
You
So
know,
you say that the measures proposed per the estimation of the individual bond holders forum yield a net savings of 83.5 billion Ghana cedis. The IBF holds the position that the recommendations are competent enough to urgently address the fiscal challenges and enable us to reach the desired 55% debt to GDP target proposed to the IMF. So your position is that, once again, you don't actually need individual bondholders in this business.
Absolutely, Samson. I'll tell you, if government we work together on this one, the government to actually have its eligible debt target by 60%. I mean, just doing this alone. The only thing is that some of these measures are also a bit medium term, as in short term, in that I guess a lot of them are achievable in this year. A lot of them are achievable in this year. Some may be achievable over a course of 2 years. Remember this entire IMF program and this target that we are talking about, 55%, is for 2028. It's not that government is supposed to achieve 55% today. No, by 2028. But even with these measures, government can actually achieve clearly only on this about 30 to 40% of its of a reduction in this targeted debt. So it's not something that can't be done. It can be done, but it can be a mix of things. In solving this problem, government has maybe two major options. You have debt operations, and you also look at fiscal readjustments. What we have recommended are fiscal readjustments, which are very practical. Government had recommended debt operations. So we can blend both. And in blending both, I think we can win as a country. The banks have made some commitment that enables government to bring in the debt operations. Insurers have also done the same. The central bank, often people don't mention, is equally participating in this entire exercise. They are easily the single largest exposed entity in this entire debt conversation. But they're also participating in there. So when the individuals now come up with fiscal readjustments and you blend both, we should be winning together as a country. Another thing you may have missed, even in this exercise, we as individuals have actually given government leads that actually put increased tax burden on us, which government actually had missed. So we are even also putting our skin in the game. So all of us as a country would have to work together for us to win. Ghana is one, and we must make Ghana work.
All right. Dr. Theo Champong, you have seen what has happened so far in the course of this week, and the deadline is just by the corner. Is it 2 days or 3? Then we are done. So what do you say? Good success for the bankers, insurers, and the securities, but the individual bondholders, what do you say? Do you suspect they will get anything? Because the government has not officially also stated its position on what will happen to them.
Yeah, good morning. And I hope you can hear me loud and clear.
Very clearly.
I think we need to acknowledge the fact, rightfully, that some good progress has been made on the whole domestic debt exchange program. And like Senya was saying, you have 3 of the important stakeholder groups now agreeing through their associations to be a part of that process with, revised terms that the government is offering to them. So specifically, we have, like you mentioned, the securities agencies, we have the banks, we have the insurance companies, of course, there's the central bank and the like in the collectively, when you add all of them up, it is possible to actually get about 65-70% participation in the program. And what that then means is that you don't necessarily actually need the individual bondholders for this to become a success in that regard. again, let me just reiterate Senyor's point here. With the institutions, they have fail-safe or safeguard measures that they can fall back on. We're talking about the Stability Fund, and we're talking about other changes to the way they report their capital requirements, etc. So there's some sort of incentive in there that allows them to partially mitigate the effect of the restructuring, exercise. But with the individual bondholders, it becomes quite tricky because they don't have anything like that. And the consequence of, them participating in this exercise, even under the revised or restructured terms, on the wider economy is going to be actually quite that. So I think that it's still possible to actually conclude this exercise with the institutions and not include the individual bondholders, just like the government actually offered at the very beginning of this exercise. And there's an interesting statement or quote in what the government said with the insurance, rather the Securities Industry Association in the press release from yesterday. The 2B of the statement talks about, quote, the collective investment schemes and individuals who hold bonds in trust accounts with the Securities and Exchange Commission approved firms would be offered any enhanced commercial terms agreed with, or, and this is the important part, exemptions granted to individual bondholders. So I think it's very much possible that in the next 2 or 3 days before the exercise ends, we might maybe see a statement coming through that the individual bondholders perhaps are exempted, and those other individuals who have their investments in these collective investment schemes would also be partially or fully exempted. That then would ensure that, for me, the process is fair and there's a sense of burden sharing. But at the moment, yes, good progress has been made, and it is possible to conclude this exercise with the institutional players and not necessarily include the individual bondholders, because the socioeconomic consequences of that would actually be quite dire if we were to move that trajectory.
Right. And you find the proposals by the committee that was set, the technical committee that was set up, the proposals on the side of the individual bondholders, you find them reasonable and something that the ministry must adopt?
These are the same things that we've been talking about for the last, 3-4 years, about the fact that you need to live within your means on the expenditure side, but of course you need to raise additional revenue as well. So, I mean, they did a good piece of work by bringing on the table in excess of 83 billion Ghana cedis of potential, revenue or savings that can be made. And it's actually quite an important point here. Let it not, or the impression has been created as though it is just a domestic or a debt exchange program. We need to address what actually led us to this point in the first instance, which is that we have been living recklessly, we've been living beyond our means, and to an extent we have mismanaged some of the economic gains that we made a few years ago. Classic example being just the Auditor General's report into the COVID funds.
Right.
You can see the wastage within the system. Those are the big issues that we need to tackle. And so the IBF is very much on point in highlighting where we can make savings and in highlighting the fact that this conversation goes beyond just debt restructuring. It's a bigger issue of economic governance.
Right. I've heard it suggestions that it may take a whole generation to correct the problem with the financial sector after this program. Coming from where we are coming from, the DKMs or whatever, the men's gold, the bank and financial institutions collapse, and then suddenly now the most trusted source of investment also is suffering this. But the suggestion by the Catholic Bishops' Conference, they say, whilst they require everything, they ask all of us to, as it were, appreciate the current economic situation and understand that there will be difficulties in the coming month. There are those who suggest that we must be part of this. It's already come on us. So we must be willing to let go of something. Shouldn't the individual bondholders, and I think I'm one of them, do I think, in fact I am, shouldn't they be thinking that something must give from their end as well?
Yeah, but something must give. They're already giving away in terms of the inflation that they're suffering, right? Or actually, Ghanaians are collectively, suffering. We're talking 50% inflation currently. So already, the money that you have doesn't go that far. We're talking about, hikes in the cost of goods and services across the board. So for me, I don't think necessarily that something must give translates into further impoverishing Ghanaians. I strongly disagree with that view,
All right.
especially when you're not offering any other alternative, right, to them on the table. And as they have shown, and as those of us in civil society have shown, the biggest problem in the room here is not Ghanaians. The biggest problem in the room is the Ghanaian government, which has led us down this pathway of now having to comprehensively restructure the country's debt. And it is very possible for the government to cut part of its expenditure and to raise other revenue without burdening Ghanaians further and without further sort of impoverishing Ghanaians and creating more inequality and inequity in the system. So I think we are already doing our bit as citizens in sharing the burden. And I don't think there's any more that we can do much further beyond just being good citizens, maybe paying our taxes. But the biggest problem, I repeat again, is the government. And that's where we must start from.
My final question to you will be this. I want you to help us get a certain perspective. Bishop Charles Ajinasare, for example, was preaching to his congregants and disclosed that he has some 106,000 cedis in an institution, and he sought to withdraw the money. And he was told that he cannot withdraw the money, what they can do for him. And it's a favor to him because he is, if you like it, a VVIP. I mean, there's no question about that. So he can get 1,000 cedis of his investment each week until the debt is fully financed. That means it's going to take him how many months? 106,000 Ghana cedis. How does this happen?
Yeah, it happens because there's no liquidity within the system. So remember that if you go and give your money to a bank or an investment association, basically they don't keep all of the money with them. They have to invest that money and generate a return in order to be able to repay you back. And in an environment where there's a lot of fear and anxiety, a lot of people then tend to want to cash out of those investments. Normally, the industry ratio, I think it's about probably only about 1 in 10 or 2 in 10 may walk in to demand their investment. But if you have more than that, sometimes half walking in, there's no way you'll be able to provide that money back to them because you need to exit those investments to actually create the liquidity that is required. So basically that's what's happening, that it is not as though the money isn't there, but the monies are locked up in the investments that these firms have made. So it's going to be difficult for any of the firms to be able to honor the payment obligations that are required for you. And part of the reason why that is the case is because of the whole fear of, the restructuring exercise and the anxiety that has created for a lot of investors.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Thierry Champong, political risk analyst and economist. Now, you stay with us. It's Senor that takes leave of us. And Senor, so today is the 28th. what's going to happen if you don't get the total exemption that you seek?
Well, for starters, I think we also have to manage that part of the communication. The truth is, it is a voluntary exercise. The minister has made it clear that it's voluntary. And yesterday we met with him, he reiterated the fact, look, it's voluntary. So it's not as though we have been forced into it that we actually even technically need some kind of exemption or not.
But we know that it is voluntary, but it is obligatory somewhat. And you have been told that if you don't do it, you are the worst for it.
So it was first. Well, it was first presented as voluntary by force. But right now, I think that from our engagements with the minister yesterday, it is voluntary. And he is committed to that. He was very emphatic that for individuals, there'll be no punitive action for you if you do not accept the DD. But he would encourage that as a community, to the extent that we can all support the country, we do. And I think that we've exercised that through our participation in this committee and very strong recommendations to have about 83 billion, almost 84 billion saved that can help him also manage affairs, which he was very grateful for. So as of yesterday, for us as individuals, the voluntary is now voluntary, no more voluntary by force.
Okay.
But, Samson, we just need to protect this subsector. The key challenges that were mentioned with this illiquidity from Ajinasari is because there's total uncertainty. But once we are done with this exercise, this market is going to be back. Our country is going to be back. The liquidity is going to be restored. But we all have a responsibility to help government restore confidence in the financial system.
All right.
It didn't manage the communication well. Let's be very clear about that. Government really managed this so woefully. But it can be fixed, and together we need to work to fix it.
Okay. Thank you very much, Senor Hosi. And I want to give you just a minute each to address this issue. There are many who are worried, concerned, and if you read from experts, including Togba Fede's presentation, if you read from many people, including people who are known to be with this government, the government is asking people to do something, but they are asking, what are you giving? And President Mahama in London yesterday, we understand he was at Chatham House, and he spoke and said, you're asking everybody to sacrifice, but you are not. Nothing seems to be changing. Kweku Nchubu Esiaku says, something must give, but government gives nothing. A government whose mismanagement brought us here. Nobody must sacrifice to prop up this unfit for purpose government. You heard Kwame Pieni, he says his one kobo will not go into it. I walk into the bank and I saw people doing their stuff, and I try to also say, please don't roll over when my thing matures. And as I try to do it, deep within me, something tells me, if all of us are doing this, then we are crashing the economy. So government must do something.
Well, thank you very much, Samson, and good morning to you. Good morning to Senor and Doc, and good morning to my good brother Kofi, and to my constituents, those who are watching from BNA, Botiano English Among from. Of course, I've been going through the report of the individual bondholders on this technical committee report. Indeed, what is happening is not pleasant, and nobody in the split of a second think that is pleasant for this country. Something, I'll tell you what, we are afloat and holding ourselves where we are today simply because our country or economy is largely informal. So there are a lot of people who are oblivious to what is happening. The market woman, those who go to the shop and come back, they don't keep their monies in the banks and all that. And that has a huge toll on this economy over a long period of time. So we've been making an effort to ensure that we do financial inclusion to bring these people on board. Those already included in the financial sector, that is beneficial to this economy for liquidity purposes. This is what is happening. So you can imagine people now have the laxity to stay in their comfort zone. So we are really keeping afloat simply because of the huge numbers of people who on daily basis do transactions and they are not banked. And that is a problem we have. You know of DKM and all these institutions that took advantage.
So
of
my
it.
specific question for you guys, only for a minute, is
I'm coming there.
Is that the expectation is that for government to show appreciation, that to show that it appreciates where we are,
right?
It should be cutting this, big government, cutting it to half.
Well, Samson, where I sit and where the president sits are two different positions. And like I said on another network, that the president first term had 122 ministers and deputy ministers. His second term, he reduced it to 85 ministers and deputy ministers.
And we cannot applaud him for doing that. He set his own record and then worked on it.
I mean, let's follow the trajectory.
Go ahead.
Well, I'm saying that from 122 to 85 ministers and deputy ministers, it's obvious, it's become so evident to everybody that in the face of this crisis, government must still reduce its size. But the question that we ask, and I haven't seen that in all the analysis people have done, that reduce government size from current 85 ministers and deputy ministers to say 60 or 50. What will be the gain? But of course, the biggest gain here,
Professor Stephen Adair says you can even get to 44.
Well, you can even do 20. I mean, any people can have, you can do 20.
Yes. Dr. Idum promised that he will do 20 ministers.
Well,
yes, go ahead.
Well, I don't want
You said what will be the gain?
Yes,
you said
the gain, I'm saying the biggest gain here is the confidence that it gives to the economy. That is number one confidence that we can all. So clearly, we all know ministries, departments, and agencies, and the role of many ministries. The president, there's reshuffle in the offing. Perhaps he will further listen.
Reshuffle in the offing.
Of course. I mean,
we have heard that. We are tired.
We are tired.
I think we are very interested in
So something, clearly what is happening, we are all not happy about it. And I tell you what, this is not NDC or NPP matter, because it affects all of us. I'm included, you are, my brother Kofi, and everybody. This is where we are. But I think that what the Ministry of Finance have failed to do over time was to have started engagement much earlier.
Okay.
You see the position of the individual bondholders and the forum. They were quite hostile. But today, Senior Hosi in his own comment says that they applaud the minister for the kind of engagement and where they've got into. And I think if we had started this much earlier, we wouldn't have gotten where we are.
And
now we have two.
Bryce Simon showed us other countries where they have done this. It took some of them 18 months. It took some of them up to 30 months or more. Some of them, to do the negotiation. In our case, it started when? Just how many weeks? And we are concluding. Yes, Kofi, just a minute. We want to take a break and come to deal with the budget, COVID-19.
Good morning and Happy New Year to you. We haven't seen each other for a very long time.
Right.
And to my colleague, Tete, good morning. Viewers, I greet you all and others on Zoom. Samson, the summary of all this is that government, he says it's not partisan, that's true, so I'm not going to mention MPP. Government has totally failed Ghanaians. He's failed Ghanaians, he's failed persons who trusted government and trusted this country. The colors that they saw Ghana, the red, the green, and the yellow with the black star, and had confidence in it, that we put our money in there. They have failed them. They have failed on all fronts. The question is, how did we get here? Samson, were we warned or advised? Sometimes you get into a situation where you have not been warned, you have not been advised. It crashes you and say, okay, I haven't been advised, but we were forewarned. We had every information to have avoided this. We had every information to have engaged earlier. But this government decided that they will do their own thing. And some leaks or documents that have been intercepted showed that even at cabinet level, they had their own mind, thinking that they could use force They could even come to Parliament if they had the numbers to get Parliament to pass laws to just abruptly implement a program.
There was advice sought from the Attorney General, who is part of the government, and advised that it can only be.
I'm telling you,
no secret.
No, Samson. Yes, Samson. I am only telling you what leaders we have elected were thinking. I'm only saying that.
Government.
No, to even Samson, to even begin to think about that before even seeking advice, to tell you how dangerous they are. That let's just use force. People's investments.
Okay, Kofi.
People's investments that they've put in there, a government decide its own recklessness that has brought us these bad results. You sit there, and this is what you were thinking, bet for the Attorney General.
But Samson,
all right, we have to go on a break. I gave you guys just a minute each.
Let me make a quick point.
But you have not committed to it the way I expected.
It's not just started. You see, there are things we've done over time, since 30 years and so that has culminated into where we are.
What do you say to those who say for the president to still keep Ken Ofori-Atta, whom some of you wanted dismissed?
I want him out.
It means he doesn't understand what is going on.
He's
not making the necessary sacrifice.
The fact that you want him out, for instance, I want Ken Ofori-Atta out, and I've been advocating that Ken Ofori-Atta.
You wanted
it doesn't mean the president doesn't know what he's doing.
But you are allowing him to interject into my 1 minute that you
are done with your 1 minute. You were done with 5 minutes.
No, we are taking a break here.
Okay, so when we get back, then I'll conclude.
You not conclude on this. Okay, do that in 30 seconds.
Clearly, he was trying to say that blame be passed on to some others. At the time they took over, our debt to GDP level was 56%. Today, what is it? It's more than 100%. So you cannot transfer this blame to anybody.
Thank you very much.
It is something you brought.
This is where we take a break.
Don't
we return to look at the Auditor General's, examination of our accounts as far as the COVID-19 expenditure is concerned. We'll be right back. Right, so the president fired the labor minister and also spoke about the arrest of 14 people, including senior officials who, had been found by an investigation on the spending of the COVID money in 2020, 2021. And this was the president speaking on in April 2021. Yes, this was Nana Akufo-Addo speaking. Speaking after the reports of the Auditor General finding that people had misplaced or had misused or had stolen public funds. Sorry, did I say Nana Akufo-Addo? No. Yeah, this is the Malawian president, and how he dealt with such a wrong act. Dismissed his minister, got the security to do their job, and then rained curses on people who were stealing, misusing money, among others. Some used it for so much for travel. What will happen in our case? Are we back to the ritual? The Auditor General issues the report, finds all sorts of wrongs, and nothing. Sometimes absolutely nothing happens. We wait for the next year, another report is issued. We all get angry, and then end of the matter. Will we have President Akufo-Addo in that posture like we saw the Malawian president? Let's hear a few individuals and what they had to say about the Auditor General's report, special report on the COVID-19 funds that we have waited till now to audit.
In 2022, the country director for the World Bank indicated that Ghana was giving about $903 million. Ivan, do you recall?
Yes, I recall.
very well. If you read the Auditor General's report, the amount that has been accounted for is in a region of about 430 million US. So there are a lot, and quite apart from all these figures, we'll look at how judicious these resources was put to. Even, I am sure that from when the Auditor General's report was published, we will all settle the issue of the financial difficulties we find ourselves being attributed to COVID. Because, of course, if you have any competent government and you, in a matter of 2 years, you pump not less than about 22 billion Ghana cedis into your economy, the economy should be booming than collapsing as we see now.
This government has touted we are at the IMF because of the Russia-Ukraine war and COVID. If these are the egregious anomalies in the expenditure, I ask myself, are we really in this precarious situation because of COVID? No. I go back to say COVID gave us a bounty, because anyone who's read the African Development Fund report says that they told us in 2019 that, in fact, our bonds were junk. But we are being told that the very thing, which was the pandemic, which gave us enough money for us to remedy our junk status as of 2019, is the reason why we are in the pits. And like I always say, when you are in the pit, stop digging. Unfortunately, this government has gotten itself a group of beavers who are busy digging and damming rivers to try and prevent anyone from seeing how badly they manage these funds.
As to why there is no disallowance or surcharges recently, I think the best person to answer that should be the Auditor General. Remember, the Constitution under Article 1A7 Clause 7B provides that the Auditor General, in the performance of his function, can disallow any item, in fact, he used the word may, disallow any item of expenditure which is contrary to law and surcharge the people responsible. And that is what I sought to do, because I thought if there are no consequences for the infractions, the culture of impunity will continue. So that is what I sought to do. And I know for sure that the current Auditor General, Mr. Johnson Asiedu Ekuamwa, is more than capable of doing the same. Maybe he may have some challenges which I am not aware of, but I think that by the time I left office, the mechanisms and the institutional arrangements were in place, which he can use to do same.
Right. So you had Kwame Sapong Asiedu, you had also Kwabena Minta Akando, and former Auditor General Daniel Domelevo speaking to us in those interviews. And the amount of 21 billion plus expenditure for the COVID period, that's the amount that we got from our various sources. And according to the Auditor General, here are some of the top highlights that we want to bring to your attention. Now, it says that 120.19 million was to UNICEF AVAT for the supply of 16.3 million vaccines. However, only 5.11 million doses of the vaccines, valued at 38.232 million, were supplied. So 16 million, only 5 million was supplied. Let's continue on. There is an outstanding amount, consequently, of 81.87 million with UNICEF adverts. Then 607,419 was paid out of a total of, that's a million, was paid to contract for supply of 26 Toyota Hiace deluxe ambulances. The contract was signed on the 1st of December 2021, and the ambulances were to be delivered by 15th January 2022. However, no ambulances were delivered as of 28th of November 2022, as they did the audit. Then medical equipment valued at 110 and 27,000 Ghana cedis were issued to a private hospital by name Christ Leeds and Specialist Hospital, belonging to Dr. C.K. Amenu Veve in Medina. The hospital did not serve as a COVID-19 isolation center or did not receive any COVID-19 patients. So the hospital didn't receive patients. It didn't also serve as a center, and yet the money was paid. The Ministry of Information paid themselves a total amount of 175,500 Ghana cedis as COVID-19 risk allowance. The auditor says this was contrary to the risk allowances directive and without approval from the Office of the Chief of Staff. Then these, it says, are unaccounted for funds by some chiefs. Some monies were given to some chiefs. 451,800 were disbursed directly to paramount chiefs of the some traditional councils. These payments were unsubstantiated with relevant supporting documents. 2 regional houses of chiefs misapplied a total of 154,161 and 97 pesos. Then you had 5 million said to have been paid to Dredge Masters Limited for the removal of plastic waste without certificates of work completed. There is also the isolation center that issues came up of. The Ministry of Health entered into a 25-year finance lease agreement at a total lease value of 15.26 million Ghana cedis in 2020 to be used as a holding isolation center in Adaklu in the Volta region. The facility could not be used for the intended purpose, which resulted in an additional cost of 20.38 million Ghana cedis. Please note that, an additional cost, even though it wasn't used. So 20 million also went. Delayed projects, the 7 isolation and treatment centers being constructed at a cost of 158 million Ghana cedis had not been completed at the time of the audit. This is some 30 months after the construction had commenced. I think I can pause here so that we continue. We start the discussion and see where it takes us to. So I'll begin with Dr. Theo Champong. Thank you very much for staying with us. Your overview of this report, and I'm sure you are zeroing in on the infractions and what the corrective measures are supposed to be.
Yeah, Samson, remember you actually made a statement. Is this back to the same old ritual? Unfortunately, yes, that is what this report points out, that we have very weak systems to check spending, and often, we've been living pretty much like Arabian, princes and kings, in the sense that it's as though we are unable to account or fully utilize the amount that have been provided to us. In the midst of a crisis like this, or like COVID, as we saw, of course, speed was important, and the government had to respond to the issues. But that did not mean that we have to sidestep the provisions that you have within the public financial management laws of the country. And you can see this pattern, whether it is COVID or whether it is the other reports that the Auditor General issues, that consistently our institutions, our agencies, our departments are able to spend without recourse to the laid down processes and the laid down procedures.
But at the time, we were made to understand that we should allow for some room because of the exigency of the situation. Don't expect people to follow the rules. The health minister was in Parliament.
I get that, but that doesn't mean that you need to sidestep the rules entirely. I mean, to the point that you're giving some money, so hospitals are being given money for literally next to no work being done. What I'm trying to paint us here is that at the core, the checks and balances that we have within our governance architecture is extremely weak. So all you then have to have is an event like COVID or any other sort of external event for you to now expose that strong weakness that we have within that core. Because the laws are literally not working. Those checks and balances are not working. So we keep collecting money, whether it is COVID money, whether it is IMF money, whether it is World Bank money, and it's still going into the same leaking basket, right? Only for us to get to a point where we say, well, we are not able to pay you, so we have to restructure our debt, like the conversation we had a few moments ago. That is the real issue that we've got to, in my view, address here, and to the point that we are not able, as a people, as a government, to put in those safeguards. Unfortunately, then we'll keep having these issues one way or the other. So what is the way forward? I think it is very clear. And even before I come to the way forward, another point just to highlight how lax this whole engagement has been. Go and read the press release that the Finance Ministry itself issued in relation to this report. Right. Paragraph 4. They say that, well, the ministry welcomes the report and wishes to assure the public that, quote unquote, steps are being taken to address all the issues, right? And they talk about asking the agencies to evaluate their actions to implement audit recommendations. And they talk about preparation of an emergency expenditure management guidelines. We have heard all these things before. Year in, year out, Auditor General's reports are issued. We hear things about implementing audit recommendations. It's been there. You can go back 20, 30 years, similar things, and still the leakages are happening. Still, we're seeing people getting away with, a theft of public money. That's not right. So I think we need to see the prosecutions happening. We need to see the OSP getting on top of some of the issues that have been highlighted in the report. But I think importantly, we also need to get the Auditor General itself to start implementing the surcharge and the disallowances. We've seen bits of that work when the past Auditor General was in power, and I'm looking forward to this Auditor General or the office, rather, let's not make it a personality, start implementing those surcharges and disallowances, because this is public money.
Right.
This is no
Doc, look at the next slide that we are about to scroll for you on the screen. The Finance Ministry told us, the minister told us when he appeared in Parliament, that these are the sources from which we got the money that we used for the, COVID situation. Contingency Fund, World Bank Group, International Monetary Fund, Africa Development Bank, European Union, sale of BOG COVID-19 bonds, Korea sent us money, Germany gave us money, and the government of Ghana also gave us money. In all, 9 sources. His report predates this audit. Yet we have an audit that gives us 6 sources. What do you say about that? How do we now account for the money from Korea, Germany, and government of Ghana?
So what it tells you is that the extent of the rot is even going to be deeper if you account for the extra 3, sources, particularly the government of Ghana money, right? You even see a much deeper rot, much bigger infractions if one were to include all of those sources within that. And the point that I started off by making is that fundamentally we have a problem. And the problem is that we are sidestepping the laws, we are sidestepping the Public Financial Management Act, and everybody is doing their own thing. And it looks as though the institutions are not able to really be on top of their. In fact, it's not. It looks as though the institutions are not on top of their game. So we just keep pouring money into a leaking basket. So for me, this report is not different from any of the other Auditor General's reports that we've seen in the past. The last one we were made mention about almost was 17 billion or so unaccounted for, and there are other similar things in the past. So we need to strengthen the institutions, we need to strengthen the governance, we need to see prosecutions, and importantly, we need to get the regime of the surcharge and the disallowances, going. Other than that, we'll be here 6 months, 1 year, and we'll still be discussing the same issue.
Again, doesn't it come to you a bit, surprising that the requirement of the law is that these funds were to be audited every year? Now we have 3 years lump up, and there is an audit of all the 3 years.
Yeah, so that is not, for me, it's a bit of an issue, but it's not really the big issue. At least the audit has been done, covering the 3 years. 6 of the funds or 6 of the sources were included, and the other 3 were not included. But the bigger point is that it tells us that we have a deeper problem and a crisis that we need to fix, which is the crisis of expenditure management and the crisis of having to spend within the remit of the law. And that is part of the broader national conversation we need to have as we actually go into an IMF program and start fixing the problems. Because these are the things that lead to the debt overhang and the issues where the government is not able to repay, right, its balances, and basically asking institutional investors and individual bondholders to take a haircut when you can see clearly that the government is really not doing enough on its part to plug in those, leakages.
Right. So what do we do about the unaccounted for funds that we receive from Korea, from Germany, and also from the government of Ghana? This is what has been accounted for, which totals almost about 22 billion Ghana cedis. What happens to that money?
I presume that the Auditor General may be doing a follow-on audit. I don't know. But if that is not the case, then we can implore on the Auditor General to complete or conclude the full audit. That's as best as we can do.
Can it be explained away that the Auditor General missed these 3 sources of funds and didn't capture them and said nothing about them in the audit?
I haven't fully read the full report, so I'm not in a position to talk about sort of the assumptions that went into the inclusion of the 6 and the exclusion of the three. Perhaps the other panelists may be able to provide better insights on that.
All right. Thank you for that. Now, let's back to the studio now. Yes, Kofi, you have actually isolated some specific expenditure that, you wanted to talk about.
Yes, Samson, it's true. I have isolated some, but even before I deal with those ones, let me attempt to look at some issues that have been raised about the non-capturing of some sources.
Three sources.
The three sources. The Auditor General, what he does is to audit the accounts that has been prepared by the various ministries, departments, and agencies. So what they capture and report is what the Auditor General will audit on. And so if you don't capture it, it becomes very difficult for the staff of the audit service to be able on their own just know that this came from here, that came from there, that came from there. And this explains why, Samson, Parliament was interested in looking into the COVID expenditure. Because Parliament will have all the information and will be able to question why this has not been captured.
But first of all, are you saying or suggesting that once the Auditor General is presented with whatever, it must go on and should not be asking questions? Because the Ministry of Finance gave us this statement to Parliament on the COVID-19 expenditure 2020-2021 by Honorable Minister of Finance, and is dated June 2022. This is public.
Samson, he should be asking, but he didn't ask. That is the more reason why we express that fear. And our colleagues on the other side said no, they will not support that, and that the Auditor General is there to do the audit. And we cannot in Parliament presume and assume that responsibility of attempting to audit the COVID-19 funds. And so we should allow the Auditor General to do his work. These were some of the reasons why the minority, the NDC side in Parliament, said we wanted Parliament to be involved. One of the deputy speakers, I think the first deputy speaker, who was responsible for the chair on that day, actually threw out our motion. It took Mr. Speaker himself to get it readmitted and Parliament constituting a committee to go into the COVID-19 expenditures. And we've been told by Dr. Kesela Tofosen that from 7th of February this year, they will be sitting and it will be live. Ghanaians will watch and see. And some of these sources that are found in the minister's report to Parliament, but not captured in the Auditor General's report, will surely feature when Parliament begin to look into the COVID-19 expenditures. They will surely look into those three other sources that did not find space in the Auditor General's report. But even without finding space, Samson, look at the rot that is confronting us. You pick them item by item. Take, for example, that to do with even the chiefs, which is a small amount though. But Samson, can you see something? That irrespective of the size of the region and the number of paramount chiefs or traditional areas involved, it is 80,000. Irrespective of the size.
At one point, it was reported as TNTO.
And irrespective of the size of the region and the number of traditional areas and paramount chiefs involved, the amount allocated is the same, and they spent everything. How? Are you telling me that, for example, Greater Accra, they said 12 traditional councils, 80,000. Central region, 34, 80,000. Eastern region, 11, 80,000. Brongahafo has his number, 80,000. Ashanti region, 80,000. So for the workshop that it doesn't matter where they were coming from, it doesn't matter the distance, it doesn't matter the number.
What's your suspicion here?
My suspicion is that something is wrong, and that is why it's been captured as unaccounted for. There's no way you can account for such money. There's no way. How can you account for this? It's just not possible. This is some creative reporting, so you can't account. So I'm not surprised that the Auditor General has captured this as an expenditure that could not be accounted for. How are you going to account for it? Then you go in and you also find out that statutory funds that take their sources from laws of this country, like say Get Fund, you are supposed to pay a percentage of VAT that you collect to Get Fund. Now you go and take money from, say, IMF, and you are now paying a portion of that money to Get Fund. You go and take money from World Bank, and you are now paying District Assembly Common Fund from that. What type of government is this?
Maybe because of COVID, you couldn't raise the taxes.
It says what you raise is what you should pay. You are not forced to pay what you have not raised. Samson, we agree that we'll raise 10 cedi. Because of COVID.
You will appreciate that the question I ask is the devil advocate.
I know.
Because it doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense. You indicate that you raise 10 cedi. Because of COVID, you could raise only 5 cedi. It says pay a percentage of this into a fund. Why do you force yourself to go and borrow when you did not raise 10 cedi? But meanwhile, that was not what also happened. They paid according to the revenue. So where did you put that money? Clearly, it doesn't make sense. Maybe Sylvester will be able to answer this. What kind of accounting is this that their finance minister, their darling man that they themselves wanted
he's
out?
not one of them.
They wanted him out. They went there and they were told.
He just told you a while ago that he still does.
They were told stories and they accepted those stories. That's a fair comment. But you accepted the stories that the man should lead, should come and present a budget. Look. At the time they did the press conference, Samson, they knew that budget presentation was ahead of us because anytime we come for our third meeting, budget is the focus. So they knew.
Please remember we are talking COVID funds.
Yes, they knew. Samson, they knew also that IMF, the issue of IMF have been indicated and that there will be engagement. And when the NDC time we went to IMF, it wasn't the finance minister that led the process. So being told that there's budget, there's IMF, and so leave the man to be there to continue to mismanage, and you accepted it and came back. And when we were giving you opportunity, you walked out and say you wouldn't accept his removal.
Wicked opportunity.
Oh, well, so today you are still being visited with all these kind of situations. If you had worked with us by now, he would still not be there. Samson, we made matters worse. The president himself announced that there's going to be a special insurance package for frontline officers, health officers, and so on and so forth. And a certain amount of allowance will be paid, I think 150 per day, and some other, let me call it, non-taxable funds will be made available to all these persons. Only for us to have in the Auditor General Special Audit that the Ministry of Information paid itself some risk allowance other than what has been properly arranged by the government, and we were all told just because the money was there. So they found money, so let's pay allowances to ourselves.
If the fact that there's a problem in accounting, does it mean stealing or that some fraud has happened? Didn't you follow that the Ministry of Information, for example, was organizing these press conferences, series of engagement with, for COVID, as it were, updates at the ministry all the time, and officers at the Ministry of Information were also going around almost all the time, or they should be entitled.
Samson, the president told us there's a package for all these category of persons. If they were not captured, the chief of staff office existed for you to seek clearance. You see, the fact that there is a situation doesn't mean you should set aside every rule. It doesn't mean that every rule should be set aside and that you decide to do things just the way you want to do them. It creates room for possible embezzlement of funds that should not have. And clearly, the report shows in a number of the areas that COVID, as has been reported, to be the reason for why we found ourselves in this mess was not because of COVID itself as a disease that came around, but because of how our government handled funds that came into his hands during the COVID. That is the only reason why COVID has become a problem. It is not the disease itself that has become a problem. And that is why, Samson, you have other countries that suffered COVID that are now facing the kind of situation that we find ourselves in. And the two topics, the one we did earlier and this, they are linked. Why are we today unable to honor bonds from persons, including even Esla and Dachi? Including Esla and Dachi bonds, which is hooked or linked to a revenue mobilization of VAT, a percentage of VAT that we continue to collect. And oil, fuel, diesel, petrol, LPG that we buy every day. These are sources that are linked to this Esla PLC bonds and the Dachi bonds. So clearly COVID came, yes. But per the information that we have received now, COVID indeed brought us even more money. Samson, I told a group that I met, I said, death is something nobody wants to happen to him or in his family. But there are instances where death has resulted in revenue mobilization for the family, depending on the circumstance, where sometimes a death has occurred, a relative is lost, you end up raising like about 10 million or 100 million, let me use it as an example. You spend maybe 10 million of the 100 million in organizing the funeral and other costs. By the next year, you should not be complaining of inability to pay fee because your father has died. Because out of the death, you had 90 million. That if you had invested, appropriately, you should not be complaining about failure to pay school fees. Okay. But if you continue to mess the 90 million thinking that that situation will remain.
But certain funerals are also organized at debt.
I know, but in our case, we didn't.
Okay.
COVID, we spent only about 11 billion in COVID related, and we got 10-point-something billion to support other areas. Okay. If we had done it well, today, we should be smiling that when COVID came, we got Bank of Ghana to give us 10 billion.
Right.
We got World Bank to give us 5 billion. We got IMF to give us 3 billion.
Thank you.
We
now,
got this to give us this.
If you can pause there, I'd like to go to Sylvester Tete, but I want him, because of where he's coming from the government side, I want him to hold on. Do we have Suleiman on the line? Is Suleiman Abrahama joining us?
Yes, Samson.
Yes. Thank you very much, and thanks for your patience, sir. What do you have to say about the Auditor General's report, special report on the COVID funds that you have seen?
Well, Samson, I think it's yet another scandal on our hands, but I would say that I wasn't surprised to read what I read in the Auditor General's report, because right from the beginning, there were indications that things were going to be messed up the way we are being told they've been messed up. So, for example, in June 2022, the minister says in Parliament that some 53 million Ghana cedis was spent to provide hot and dry food for some 3 million Ghanaians. And I was wondering, where were these people? Because, I mean, we're all in Ghana, and we're talking about 53.4 million Ghana cedis. Then, of course, if you recall, up to date, I don't know if you know, who signed the contract for Frontiers at our airport, for that airport COVID-19 testing, which was generating so much. At some point, we all complained about it. You know, you are traveling and you pay $50 on your return, $50. At some point, it was even more until ECOWAS stepped in for ECOWAS nationals. And then we had a situation where the finance minister appears before the appointments committee, says, well, I'm not aware who signed the contract. The health minister appears, well, I'm not aware who signed the contract. The transport minister, who's in charge of the airports, appears and he's not aware of who signed the contract. And clearly, those were signals about the kinds of things that were going on within our COVID expenditure. But Samson, I'm happy that you started with playing Lazarus Chakwere's comments when some audit was done in 2021 in Malawi. And from that, as the president said, his labor minister was fired. And we heard the reason. It was because the labor minister had spent $760. It's not a mistake. I mean, $760, not up to $1,000 as allowance as a travel allowance. And that travel was the minister accompanying the president to South Africa. So it was the president's related travel that the minister was on. And the minister spent $760, which was from COVID funds. And the president says no. For spending that money, it meant that you deprived somebody or some people who would have been saved or supported by that money, and for that reason, you are fired. And then at the same time, some 64 government officials were meant to face prosecution. That was a serious government. Early in 2020, the whole pandemic was in 2020, January, but by August 2020, in Uganda, 4 top government officials have been arrested, and their crime was for inflating the price of food that was being supplied to the vulnerable during lockdown periods. In Kenya, again in 2020, September, 15 top government officials were arrested and prosecuted after it was found that they were culpable for, some procurement malpractices related to COVID funding. In South Africa, several government officials, including a health minister, a sitting health minister, faced prosecution after investigations found that more than half of COVID-19 procurements had been done in an irregular way. And then President Ramaphosa said, look, I take these matters seriously because we are talking about life and death. And we cannot be capitalizing on this to make money for ourselves. But you come down to Ghana and you ask yourself, what has been the government's response to all the allegations, all the accusations, all the controversies?
Before all of that, we had our Minister of Health being held in Parliament for setting probe. And Parliament, I'm talking about both the majority and minority, agreeing that he had violated the Constitution and other laws. And yet, the president did nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
Actually went to, I think, the village or the hometown of the minister and told us how the minister was a good working person. So the expectation from you, like from others, is that for a president who won elections on the back of corruption or anti-corruption, he should be seen to appear to be even angrier than the Malawian president and the others who did what they did swiftly.
Exactly, Samson. I think the difference is that other governments, and perhaps that is why we are in the situation that we find ourselves in now, talking about domestic debt exchange, individual bondholders, liquidity issues and all of that. And then other countries who were also in the same similar conditions of COVID, and of course we are all in the same world in terms of Russia, Ukraine, and we don't find them going through the difficulties that we are going through because their leaders made sure that resources that were coming in to mitigate whatever effects that COVID had on their economies were being spent in ways that at least, would not be as fraudulent as we have experienced. But again, Samson, the point I make is that if you look at the total amount of monies that came in relation to COVID, over 21 billion. And these monies
almost 22.
Yes, almost 22 billion, 21.8, something billion. Now, these monies came in not at a time when the exchange rate, for example, was about 13 or 12 or 15 or whatever. It was around 7 to a dollar or maximum 8 to a dollar. And a large chunk of this money came in dollars. But let us even assume that we are using today's exchange rate. The point is that the amount of money we are talking about in relation to COVID is not too different from what we are expecting from IMF in this whole deal that it appears the whole country is now looking up to IMF. And we are talking about $3 billion US. You ask yourself, how much more is $3 billion US than the almost $22 billion that came in within a period of 2 years with perhaps far less conditionalities than the IMF would give us? So the fundamental question then is, how sure are we that $3 billion coming from IMF would provide any kind of succor, would provide any relief for our people as we are being told to believe? Because we had, within a space of 2 years, almost 22 billion. And what change did it make? I haven't seen any significant changes in the infrastructure state of our health facilities. Today, as we speak, Samson, there are regions in this country that do not have a single ventilator. And we all know that COVID patients who got into critical conditions almost always needed a ventilator to be able to survive, to have the chances of survival. And we got all these monies for COVID, and yet we still have a situation where a number of regions don't have a single ventilator. So you ask yourself, if indeed we were spending these monies in relation to COVID, then where did it go? If you recall, in July 2022, the Secretary General of the Ghana Registered Nurses and Midwives Association was on Joy News, and he made the point that a number of their members who were on the front lines combating COVID, battling COVID, had not received any allowances as promised by the president. And indeed, he also talked about the fact that he knows people who had died, some of his colleagues who had died, on the front lines, trying to treat people, gotten infected, died from COVID, and their family members never received any sort of compensation in the form of insurance. So the president promised that there is an insurance package. And from this audit report, we are reading that some monies were made to insurance companies to provide insurance cover for our frontline workers. And here we were in July 2022 being told that, look, people have died, nurses, doctors have died, their families have not received anything. So for me, it's a scandal of monumental proportions, but I'm not surprised because I don't think that we have a president who is committed to fighting corruption.
But Sule, even the insurance that you speak about, that monies were paid to a number of insurance companies. The thing about it in this audit is that there doesn't seem to appear to be a documentation as regards who is going to benefit and how much at what time.
Exactly. And so you ask yourself, how really were we committed to making judicious use of these resources that came in? And we had, again, for me, the emphasis is the time period, 2020, 2021, 2022, and we had almost 22 billion cedis as a country. Let's ask ourselves, what was really the burden of COVID Yes, first of all, the uncertainties of how things were going to go. Companies, especially within the hospitality industry, suffered. Transport, in terms of patronage, airports, transport slowed down. So certainly there was some loss to the economy. But would it be up to 22 billion? And certainly it is no. So for me, as I said, I'm not surprised because I don't have confidence that the president of the republic is committed to fighting corruption. Look, elsewhere, this is so scandalous that we would have expected the president to immediately react to it and give the assurance that, look, we're going to make sure that any persons found culpable would be dealt with because these were monies that came in to save lives and not to let people to profit from it.
All right.
But as usual,
hold on for me. I'll return to all of you briefly on your views about the recommendations after the Auditor General has found the infractions, the recommendations. There are people who are very, very disturbed about some of the recommendations. And you heard Dr. Theo Champong mention one of the recommendations to the Ministry of Finance people. Now, Sylvester, this Kwame Esiedusapong have spent his time to read this document, and he sends a message. He said, some parts of the COVID audit report makes painful reading. Are we being told that not a single sector of our governance architecture covered itself in glory? Even national security gets a mention.
Samson, exactly my point that I was going to make. And let me say that I'm an MPP. I'm an MP. Those who have followed my politics knows my position on certain matters in this country. I've never minced words, and perhaps I want to be noted for that. And no, of course, I mean, it doesn't also mean that when you want to play mischief, I'll just watch. Few things I want.
There's this it's circulating audio.
Yes.
Where some journalists are saying the money was said to have been used for a development bank. Where is it? There's no development bank. Clear misleading. There's a development bank clearly set up there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So when let people also know
Samson,
that
about development
please
bank.
Let people also know that this whole audit was initiated as a special audit by the Finance Ministry. 14th of July 2022.
It's a matter of a requirement of law.
Exactly. But
so it is not as if he had an option, right?
No, please. But they asked for a special audit. There was a special audit request by the Ministry of Finance. So people should know. Number two, people must also know that the inflows, and Parliament was briefed that, look, not all the inflows were going to go into direct COVID issues. 46% of this were going into budgetary support. So things that we were doing before, and we know that this was occasioned as a result of our inability to raise revenue to support our budget. So clearly people should not be quoting figures and saying that, oh, COVID came, we're expecting COVID expenditures here and there. There are two different lines of expenditure. And my brother knows this. So when people
I don't even understand what you are saying. So
what I'm saying is that the monies that came from the Finance Ministry to this country, part of the money, 53% went into direct COVID-related activities. And
we have a problem with how they spend those monies.
Please.
Even the
Stop. No, Kofi, don't do this.
So don't respond to him. Go ahead.
Yes.
So he's the one inviting me.
I haven't invited you, but I'm saying that you are misleading the public. That people think that once we say it's COVID, all the inflows were directed at COVID-related expenditures. And I said, no. Part of it, 46%, were directed to support budget allocation for the year. So we should know. So the audit is not even completed. So when people are expecting that the entire COVID funds that came should have been accounted for under this special audit, they will get it wrong. So you should know that. You will get it wrong because in expecting to have all the monies accounted for under this report, I'm not holding brief for anybody. He's a member of the Public Accounts Committee, we've seen wild and wildest of allegations about people and all that. At the end of the day, what happens when Parliament is called on to scrutinize the audit report and then even punish people? Like he said, whilst we were on recess, on break, that look, by the time the auditors will come, the document that the auditors didn't find to support these allegations, they will find the document to support it. It happened all this while in this country. That is the problem I have. And I think that is perhaps what is making the president hold back, or for somebody to hold back. And successive presidents have been caught up in this, that wildest of allegations are made up in audit report. What happens is that by the time they are through Public Accounts Committee, all these allegations are cleared. And that's the problem we have in this country. Listen.
Occupy Ghana did an assessment of audit reports from, I think, 2016 to 2021 or so, or 2020.
Yeah.
And they got us about 3 times, more than 3 times, what we are seeking from IMF.
But I'm saying that all those reports had gone through Parliament. It's been vetted, supporting document has been adduced.
Can I?
No, don't. No.
People's concerns are normally, please wait for
please.
him. He didn't intervene when you were speaking. People's concern has mainly been about the auditor say this has been used wrongly, this has been stolen or something, and the money is not collected back.
You know what? An amount of money had been paid, let's assume, to an institution. At the time of audit, they did not get all the vouchers to support it. Then query had been raised. It's been published. Then the institution comes back and bring all the supporting documents to validate the claim. Public Accounts Committee had okayed this. And I'm happy. This Parliament, the Public Accounts Committee, they've done a very good job. I've followed it, even whilst we are on recess. They've traveled to the north everywhere in dealing with these matters. And they have seen documents that queries had been raised. They've seen documents brought to Parliament to support these allegations that have been made.
So the auditors are not doing a good job?
Perhaps. We should also look at they should come back and challenge them.
Samson, that's where I wanted to.
Yes, please. I'm saying that, Samson, this is not the first time we are having an Auditor General's report in this country. Under the NDC, we've had worse Auditor General's report in this country. But please, the point I'm making, the institution, it goes to expose the weakness of our institutions.
When they name the infractions,
yes,
sincerely, only a few people get to exonerate themselves, not the majority. So what do you say?
So I'm saying that the report the Public Accounts Committee itself submits to Parliament, in most of the cases, don't even indict anybody. I'm telling you, we should bring the report now. That the auditor, the Public Accounts Committee themselves, that has oversight over the report that are brought for proper scrutiny. Look, for the purposes of, please, I'm saying, for the purposes of this public politicking and then oversight.
It does.
Please, look, if anybody is found culpable of spending a dime, means of a I will name and shame. But I've seen reports of this nature. At the end of the day, the said officers and institutions will come with documentation.
So Malivo made surcharges, disallowances.
There are surcharges,
a lot of money back to the state.
surcharges and disallowances. So what happens beyond that? If it's just to surcharge disallowance and we don't even go to the extent of prosecution, that's a problem.
I'm mentioning to you.
Please,
I'm mentioning to you a situation.
Yes.
That goes contrary to what you are suggesting, that most of the infractions
I didn't say
are
all.
corrected.
I didn't say all. I'm saying that go and check the Public Accounts Committee's own report to the plenary on matters of this nature. So what is happening? We had a meeting with the internal audit service, and he said that a lot of queries are raised at the internal audit level. And that don't get the attention the Auditor General's report gets. And that's so almost immediate. So if somebody will turn back and find document to that one, you can easily apprehend the situation.
So
nobody is happy.
You're talking about the percentage that went into that is it budget support.
Budget support. 46.2% went into budget support.
Right. So the
53.8% went into COVID-19 direct.
Right.
Look.
So there was money that went into liability management, statutory payments to SNIT and Get Fund. He raises issues about that.
I have my own issues about that. I'm a member of the local government committee, and I've said on this network that the law for this Assembly Common Fund does not put a gun on your head that if you estimate to get $300 million a year, and with that you pay 5% to the Disassembly Common Fund, and you don't get 300 million, you should go and look for 300 million. If you get 1 million, you pay 5%. So I can't believe why we owe to the extent that, to some instances, monies had to be borrowed and paid. I don't get it. And I've made that point publicly. I'm a member of the committee.
Because the source of those funds are clear.
So if you have 1 cedi, just pay 5%. Why should you owe it? You don't have discretion over that matter. Nobody, no minister. And it's part of the reasons I have a problem with the finance minister. Because you have no discretion over the constitutional matter. That you've collected 100 cedis, pay 5%. Why should you owe in excess of 2-3 quarters? And to the extent that if indeed there are no documents to support, I can't believe it. I know Get Fund raised some money, some loans to undertake some infrastructure. That government can take a decision to come to their aid to pay the loans when they are due. No problem with that. But when it has to do with common fund, where you have no discretion over it, if you raise 1 cedi,
but are you okay with this?
So for me,
you may not be okay with the liability management, the District Assembly Common Fund.
That's what I'm talking about.
Allocation, yes.
That's what I'm talking about.
NAPCO second quarter allocation.
Well, NAPCO payment is also budgetary allocation. For instance, it's government decision to recruit these young ones and pay them. So if our revenue stream had been reduced per the COVID, and we all know our expenditures went up and revenue came down, and budget support from these funds goes to support NAPCO, there's nothing wrong with that.
Do you remember when NAPCO was disbanded?
I think last year.
Last year?
Last year, yes.
Okay.
It was disbanded last year.
So some of it went to pay for LEAP, free SHS, free water, electricity.
These are all budgetary allocations.
Capitalization of the
nothing, and I've told you 46.2% of the money Ghana went into that.
Construction of 88 district hospitals and 7 regional hospitals, issuance of Ghana cards, and mop-up exercise across the country.
These are all government budgetary allocations. And if you don't have the money, and we've said that, it has been clear, it's been reported to Parliament, that 46.2% of this amount of money is going to support your budget. And these are budgetary lines. And Parliament has been duly informed. So there's nothing wrong with that. Look, red flags were raised during COVID and our expenditure. So I thought that institutions should have taken a cue from the way they manage it. Now people had embarrassed themselves to the extent that it's going to the president. Look, the president is a lawyer. When Auditor General, without the Auditor General's report, I doubt any president anywhere. There's Malawi experience is based on Auditor General's report. No president out of the vacuum will say that hearsay. So I fire people, I do these kind of things. The report has been...
But you are saying that because sometimes people will exonerate themselves in the audit. So it is justified that the president is silent, doesn't say anything. And I refer to you that even in Parliament, when the health minister was found to have committed constitutional breaches, both sides agreed. Nothing was done to him by the president.
The report from that committee. There was no conclusion on that report.
No conclusion, how?
There were no recommendations on that report. Parliament, that was where we were divided.
But there were findings.
The findings, what were the conclusions?
There were findings.
What were the conclusions?
Clear
you can get the report. He knows. He's a member. I'm telling you, the report that came, there was no definite recommendations on the report.
As we speak, the president has sacked 2 deputies of the National Development Authority, Northern Development Authority.
Based on an investigation.
Exactly.
Based on an investigation.
Yes, the people are yet to be tried. They have just been put in court. They've not been tried.
Of course.
So why don't you say he should wait and see what happens at the trial?
This report has just been released. And people should credit the government, the president for that matter, for initiating this special audit on this COVID-19 fund. We must appreciate that this is not out of the ordinary.
There is a law.
There is a law
requiring that the audit should be done within 6 months after each year of the expenditure. So what is the discretion of the government here? Why should we credit the government, any president or minister?
I'm saying that there was a special request that limit your audit specifically to this area for me.
In any case, where you were supposed to do the audit, where you are supposed to do the audit,
would have come anyway.
6 months after every year. Here we are. There are 3 years put together. So why should we commend anybody for this?
Samson, look, when expenditures are ongoing, there are audit and all that, there were a lot of noise about this whole thing. I said, okay, do a special audit for me in this area. Okay, so you commend the president. Now you ask that the audit report had been released. What do you do with it? For me, every Ghanaian has a right. Look, what is happening today? It is not when you go to the market and the challenges you are facing, the inflationary rate today doesn't know Kofi to say that when you go to the market, you pay for this and I will pay for this. No, we are all in this, and the president had admitted that the country is in crisis. So if the country is in crisis, look, I've read the individual bond owners report, and I think it makes a good reading. If we should go at the recommendations and how much money could have been saved to this country, that's why I was trying to make the point that look, we shouldn't discount it. And I'm happy he's made the point that the finance minister himself has acknowledged the kind of work they've done, and we should go there. There are a lot of monies that are going down the drain in this country, and there are a lot of monies that we are not collecting in this country. Property rate, they made mention of property rate. Billions could be realized from property rate, landed property rates in this country. People rent their homes in this country today. They don't pay any tax to government.
Talk COVID.
We are talking COVID. We are talking COVID. The COVID we are talking. Look, you know me, COVID, that if MPP has well over 5 million supporters, and people in government today, over 30 million Ghanaians, people in public and civil service, the audit report mentions them, that some of them are culpable. So if the audit report captures you, that there have been an infraction or indiscretion on your part, I will call for your exit, because there are equally competent people who command the position you are holding today. Okay. Nobody is indispensable in this country. Are you saying if Nanado leaves government in 2 years today, MPP can never form a government in this country? No. And are you saying people holding public service today in this country, when they leave their desks, nobody will take over? That is why we must be guided that the position you are holding, you are not indispensable. So I will never be on defense of anybody. But of course, I do so on the side of caution that the laws of this country must be applied fairly so that we don't unfairly victimize anybody. Look, I've seen the report that somebody was indisposed. A query was raised. The person had not returned to work, and the query was published as the true findings of the situation. The person came, presented the report. I watched it, Public Accounts Committee. The person had been denigrated in this country in the court of public opinion, has been dealt with properly. He brought it out, he was shedding tears. So these are matters. Then I asked the question, the institution should not die with you. In your absence, every paper trail must be properly provided in this country. So for me, it is not MPP or NDC. It is government that initiated the report. And we expect that government must act on it. And look, the president that I know, Nana Dankwa Akufo-Addo, people may say that he's been lenient about this or that. I know where the chiefs should fall. Nanado will not spare anybody.
People are not saying he's lenient too.
Yeah, I mean, people, when you are,
his actions don't match what you were saying. What you were saying before he won elections.
When you clearly place Malawi's experience and you expect him to do same. I mean, that's a comparison to what. But I'm saying that
he won elections on anti-corruption.
Of course.
Yeah. So if there are issues of corruption,
it's still a crusader.
Promised to use an principle.
No, please.
Don't add that he promised to use an principle.
Did you listen? Did you listen to the recent one that took away the Minister of State at the Finance Ministry? The recent one that took away the Minister of State at the Finance Ministry. Anas told all of us that he showed it to the president, and the president that
since 2018.
Do you know what? But when you keep a report, before appointing him, did he show the president the report at that time? No, don't do this.
Now hold on. This.
Don't do this. Let me make this point. Let me make this point.
This is what we do to wrap up.
Let me make this point.
Yes, yeah.
That Samson, me, voted for by the good people of Botiano English and Manfom. I will always be on the side of the masses. That nobody.
And people applaud you for that.
Of course, maybe nobody should think that he's bigger than the MPP, irrespective of your position. If you are culpable, we will name and shame. But I trust that the president will act swiftly on this report. But that not to say the president will stampede the processes enshrined in the laws of this country. He won't do that. He must be guided.
Well, he should just be consistent then.
The consistency is based on the laws.
Like I just mentioned to you, the Northern Development Authority matter, he should have waited for the court process to end before he sacked the 2 deputies. That should have been the same thing. Yes.
It's important to state that he brought in the sacking of a minister of state at the finance ministry and reference Anasi's report.
Yes.
The Anasi's report came before the 2020 elections.
Are you aware the president has seen it?
Yes.
Are you aware? But the announcement that altered the report says when he showed it to the president.
Yes.
You can't speculate.
It was before.
You cannot speculate. You are speculating.
Okay.
Will you allow?
So can we keep to our COVID discussion?
Yes, we will keep to it. But he put it out there. So I'm saying that at the time they appointed him, they were aware of the report.
It is not.
It was because of his erring that led to that action. But COVID report.
Please. Okay. So this is what we do. COVID report. Just a minute, because
you see, you talked about the surcharge and disallowance. As a committee, we have decided that anything to do with procurement infractions, if you come with any explanation, we will not take it as a committee. So we began from last year. So in looking at the 2019 reports, everybody who came with procurement-related infraction was referred to the Attorney General for prosecution. That you will not come and explain to us why you did sole sourcing without authorization from PPA, or why you did this, or why we will not take any explanation. So we have made referrals, but action is yet to ensue from the office of the Attorney General. We talked about the 88 district hospitals that part of the money was used in paying, and that included my municipality. You go to Jasikan now, the site, we didn't have problem with site. When the president was talking about problems with site, we had sites available. And I'm saying we didn't have problem with site. And then our site is still like a football park. There is nothing, not a single block. Just yesterday, the minority side of the health committee were in Jasikan.
When they were coming, I thought they should have passed
to expose. I am talking about where
they should have passed through Ningo Pram and see the extent of Agenda 111.
We didn't have problem with land. We didn't have problem with land. We have huge land close to a facility being used currently as a district hospital. No problem with land, not a single block. Meanwhile, $1.2 million have been advanced to a so-called contractor that has done nothing. This is how we spend.
Okay.
And that is not all.
Thank you.
That is not all.
Hold on. Yes.
I have a problem.
Doc and Sulu. Yes. Free water. What has happened?
Even free water. Again, my municipality, communities that during the COVID time they said they were giving them free water. The community have to now cough out money to go and pay for the water they drew for free because government didn't pay for it. The community didn't pay for it.
Gentlemen, hold on. Let me show you this. Let me show you this. This is how we wrap it up. Dr. Theo Champong, you had already indicated your problem with how it is ending. Kofi Adams right here says that at the Public Accounts Committee, their decision is that once it is a procurement infraction, they are not interested in any explanation at their end. You should go and explain it in the courts. We know that in this country, people have actually lost their jobs. Independent constitutional bodies, chairpersons have lost their jobs on the back of procurement infractions. So what is your expectation? The Auditor General recommends, for example, at paragraph 66, page 20, it says, we recommend that the Ministry of Finance should recover the amount of 1,700,000 from Smart Infraco Limited and pay same to the GRA. So that's the end. This organization was giving a contract, paid the contract sum of 23 million, and there was no tax. It says just go and collect the tax. If you read in other places, paragraph 71, page 21, it says we recommend that the Ministry of Health should always comply with the requirements of the Public Procurement Act to promote transparency and value for money in public procurements. Is that enough?
Within the remit of the Auditor General, those are the recommendations that they can make, but ultimately they don't have prosecutorial power. So that then shifts to other organs of the state, the Attorney General, the Independent Office of the Special Prosecutor, and other things. I think I would just very quickly finish up by saying we need to see some prosecutions after the investigations have been fully sort of exhausted in that. But it is very clear that a number of these funds, whether it is for budgetary support or it is for direct COVID, interventions, as Sylvester sought to make those distinctions, it is irrelevant. What is very clear here is that some of those monies have been wasted, some have been even possibly pilfered or stolen, and we need to see prosecutions.
Right.
We have to get to the bottom of the matter.
He has a right to choose his language. He has a right
To say it's been stolen.
He has a right.
But he can say so, but legally to say that they've stolen them.
If we get to court, if the government...
You can only go to court and get it proven. Lawyer, you are here for somebody to say you've stolen.
If we shroud everything in legal language...
So now you are throwing the legal profession away. We should all be guided. That is alleged.
If for 3 years you are being asked to account for something you did with some money, and you can't account for
so
it.
It means you've stolen.
I am at liberty to call you a thief until you show otherwise. Yes.
No, but
go on.
This is wrong. This is affront to your profession.
Right? Why are we pretending in this country that these monies don't end up in people's private pockets and that there's not precedence to it? Let's not create that impression that some of these monies have not been stolen. I still stand by that, and there's lots of ample precedence in past audit reports, including even in this one, if it goes to court, that will show that people indeed stole some of those monies.
Thank you very much. Yes, Suleimana.
Well, Samson, thank you very much. I want to deal with two quick issues. First is the impression or the claim that Honorable Sylvester makes that this audit was at the initiative of the government, sometimes it was at the initiative of the president, and we need to commend the president for this audit. And I want to say that that is absolutely not the truth. Indeed, we know that this audit was on the basis of a parliamentary decision. And in fact, if you read the audit reports, it begins with, dear Right Honorable Speaker. I don't think that is in reference to the president. And then the very first paragraph talks about, we've carried out the audit, special audit on the government of Ghana COVID-19 transaction, blah, 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 from the period March 2020 to June 2022, in accordance with the statutory mandate under Article 187 of the 1992 Constitution, and your request number HM of 14th July 2022.
Yeah.
This is the Auditor General speaking, not me.
Actually, at another point, you hear him say that they are carrying it out under the Constitution, under the Audit Act, and under the Constitution and under the Audit Act. They are not supposed to act on anybody's instructions. Please go on.
Then the second point that I want to talk about is the point that the Honorable MP was making, that, well, to suggest as though, look, we shouldn't take the audit report as it is because there have been instances that people have been exonerated after being accused in the audit report and all of that. Yes, that is true. I mean, there have been cases like that. And the point that you also make about evidence of how, certain infractions reported in audit reports have been proven to be true and people have been surcharged and monies have been recovered also is true. But what for me is fundamental is we need to look at what the auditors themselves say in terms of what were the processes that they went through before they came out with this report. And you can look at paragraph 10, where they outline the methodology that they used. And if you look at specifically paragraph 11, the report says we met with principal spending officers and their teams in entrance conferences and explained the audit processes to them, Then he says, we requested for records information and sought clarification on issues arising during our examination. We issued audit observation memoranda on our findings and obtained responses from institutions. The responses have been duly considered before arriving at our conclusions. So it is not, and in fact, I believe that the Auditor General would have said, we received responses from some institutions and did not receive from some institutions. But it is categorical. We received responses from institutions and that these responses have been duly considered before arriving at our conclusions. And in fact, if you look at paragraph 12 quickly, we held exit meetings with the principal spending officers and their teams and discussed the audit findings with them. So there's no basis to say that, look, we should wait for because it's the same people who are coming to offer explanations. And it is not about, well, at that time, we thought that we needed a JC instead of a football. If the money was meant for football and there are processes that allows you to vary the expenditure, you ought to go through the processes.
All right.
So
Thank you.
My final point is, again, is about the recommendations, as we talk about. And I am not a lawyer, you are a lawyer. And the question that I'm asking is a breach of our procurement law a crime? And if it is a crime in this country, how are crimes supposed to be treated? If somebody goes to cut somebody's plantain, steals somebody's plantain, and that is a crime, is it that, oh, well, once it's a crime, make sure that the person brings back their plantain and that is it? Make sure that you go for this and that is it. Is that how we want to build our system? I doubt that is the case. A crime is a crime and must be treated as a crime. And that is why I support the view that persons who have been found culpable have to be prosecuted. And in relation to the president, the point we make is that the president must show demonstrable commitment to the fight against corruption. And this is so monumental that given the conversations around the country and the audit findings itself, the president should have given some assurance that, look, this is a matter that the government takes seriously, and I am going to deal with any person found to have breached our laws and spent our monies in ways that ought not to have been the case, especially at this stage that the government is literally begging citizens to give off part of their property. And I'm using property in quotes because if I have invested in bonds with the government, it is my property that I've just said, government, take care of it.
Okay.
Take care of it for me.
Thank you very much, Sulemana. And please, facts are facts. Particularly, laws are laws until they have been changed. The audits are done pursuant to laws in this country, and it is not because somebody's discretion has led to the audit. And as we understand also, those who gave the money require the audit to be done, and they have been done. We take a break here. We take a break here.
Let me say this quickly before you go. On the 14th of July, 2022. There was a letter. Please.
Or not.
I'm saying
there's no denying of the fact that
there was a letter.
The minister issued the letter.
Of censure, I don't have it easy. There are people within the NDC and outside the NDC who say, and the minority failed. The question I ask, failed to do what? Ghanaian people didn't give NDC other than 137 seats. Currently, probably with 136 because one is not able to participate actively and fully as he should. The member for Asin North in our deliberations. I was convinced that given the public posture and public pronouncements of our colleagues opposite the aisle, they will support me with some 47, 67 votes so that I could seal and get a 2/3 majority. You saw them walk out and boycott it, just as they did to COVID. I've had a rare privilege to serve the Republic as Minister for Communications. My footprints are there.
Employment.
Minister for Trade and Industry, my footprints are there. Minister for Employment, my footprints are there. Even as minority leader, you may like or dislike Haruna. At least I got a speaker elected. I got a budget rejected and installed. I got a Japan rejected. I got a debt exchange which is still struggling to be approved in service of the people. The Tamale South seat is free, it's open. When nominations open, you can come in. The only thing I can assure you is that you won't get more than 5% of the vote, or probably 2%.
But I serve as on FED, I serve on NEC, I go to Council of Elders as an observer, and I'm also on the political committee as an observer. Congress, all of us as members of Parliament are members of Congress. And the minority leader is also on all these levels. At no such meeting was there any agenda to discuss this. So it is clear that it is a letter, yes, written by the General Secretary, but the decision may be just the decision of some few people in the party. And the most shocking part of it is that we were never consulted. I mean, I heard some of the officers saying that some elders were sent to talk to us. I'll be very happy to be mentioned which elder was sent to me to talk to me, because nobody spoke to me. And without casting any insinuation and also creating doubt on the capability of our colleagues, I'll just recap. In 2021, the party led by the then national chairman, Honorable Ofosu and the General Secretary came to our caucus meeting. They came and the names were sealed, so suggested names. And I remember very well, the first question they asked the General Caucus was, do you want to retain your leadership or you want to change them? And there was a row, applause, that no, we want to maintain them. Even that, they said they wanted to be sure, because there were some other names that were also coming up. Each regional caucus was asked to go back and, having the names that had come up, consider what their choice, seal it in an envelope and give it to the national party, which is exactly what happened. So it was taken to the political committee, it was summarized, and then there was another caucus meeting to announce the decision from the various 16 regional caucuses.
Who did they consult? We are practicing a democracy, and this NDC, nobody in NDC is bigger than the NDC. I have never seen any parliament where a leadership of that parliament, particularly the caucus of the parliament, leadership is imposed on the caucus. What they should have done was to consult us. And all the experiences I have had and what I have gone through and what I read, usually they will propose to parliamentary caucus and the caucus will take a decision. Now, why would you impose leaders on us? The first question is, has anybody in parliament told the party or some members of the national executive that we are dissatisfied with our leadership? They need to tell us. Two, have they consulted, or did they consult the leadership of even the caucus, even those who are taken out? My understanding is that they were not even consulted. I mean, natural justice demands that if you have leadership and you want to change them, call them. Look, for ABCD reason, we think that we want to change you people. They were not consulted. So it looks as if they are being hounded out. And that is why I think that it is not appropriate. And in any case, the timing is completely wrong. This is not the time we should be rocking the boat. This is not the time we should be engaging. As I talk to you now, there are the main issues that Ghanaians are preoccupied with. That debt restructuring, the Auditor General's report, these are of very important issues to the Ghanaian people.
Right. So, you know what happened in Parliament. There was a letter. Well, Joy News broke the story before that letter came out. That said, a letter from the National Executive of the NDC that said that changes have been made to the leadership of the NDC in Parliament. Haruna Idrisu, the minority leader, makes way for Dr. Kaisel Ato-Forson. James Kluche Aveji makes way for Ama Kofi-Boa as deputy minority leader. Muntaka Mohammed Mubarak makes way for Kwame Agboja as minority chief whip. Ibrahim Ahmed maintains his position as first deputy minority whip. Comfort Doyo Kujo also keeps her position as second deputy minority chief whip. And this has brought a lot of disquiet within the NDC. There have been press conferences almost all over the country, for and against, and then the leadership in Parliament itself, or the caucus in Parliament itself, has been divided. And some held a press conference and said they still recognize Haruna's group as the leadership. Sylvester, there are those who say the MPP is happy. Because at least for this part of the week and perhaps a few days to come, we'll not be discussing the issues that affect the NPP.
Not really. You know what makes some of us sad? That they are seeking to come back and govern this country, and they can't manage 137 people. 137 people, they can't manage them. And this is the chaos we are all visited with.
Look, you remember what was happening at your headquarters when you won
It's
election?
not 137.
You at your
That
headquarters?
was not 137.
Okay.
That was millions of people. But 137 you can't manage.
All right.
So that's a problem. You can't manage 137 people and you want to manage 30 million Ghanaians. So that's a kind of NDC for you. But of course, some of us know this will happen because it goes to confirm the deep cracks within the NDC and the long-held rivalry between Haruna Idrisu and John Mahama. You remember?
Deep cracks, and they beat you to get a speaker?
Oh, I'm telling you, between John Mahama and Haruna Idrisu. When Haruna Idrisu said he won speaker, Mahama was not in the equation. But now Mahama is coming into the equation because he played a key role in the NDC national elections. And Haruna Idrisu issued a disclaimer after Ahmed Ibrahim said that the minority leader had sent him to send a message to delegate that the parliament is with Asedun Ketia. And he issued a disclaimer that no, I didn't say so. I said, okay, wait, I'm coming. So when he won, obviously, I expected this to happen.
So that's Asedun Ketia, that's not John Mahama. Why?
But I'm saying that Asedun Ketia said they had consulted John Mahama. And the worst of all this is that the reason for this is to say that the 2024 elections will be fought on the line of economics. For that reason, they need Ato-Forson. I can't take it at anything away from him. He's a fine gentleman. He's one guy, whoever he sees in Parliament, he has a good relationship with all of us. I can't take anything from him. But if the explanation is that they need an economist or a finance person to lead them in Parliament, 137, what about the one you are seeking to lead 30 million people who is not an economist? You see the confusion the NDC itself is with. You are telling us that 137 people should be led by an economist. But the one you are seeking, a preemptive leader you are seeking for the NDC to lead this country is not an economist.
Essentially, look, when you read their opposition, those who are opposed, they are not opposed to the change.
I'm coming there.
They appear to be opposed to the process.
That's fine, but I'm saying that.
Is it obviously fair? Is it fair that they say that they ought to have been consulted? People have, and I called some of the MPs too.
Kofi,
they were completely unaware.
My friend Kofi was a national officer, and I'm sure some of these decisions were taken when he was a national deputy general secretary of the party. Of course, as a deputy general secretary, he was an insider. I don't know the processes they used to do that. But it was obvious that right after your elections, those who supported and publicly declared support for the national chairman have been maintained. And those who opposed have been kicked out.
There's been long-running battle between the speaker and the outgoing chief whip, Muntaka, in parliament. We all know. So it was obvious that the system was not comfortable with him. They will get rid of him. And of course, when Dr. Dufour was asked, if you are elected a flag bearer, who in the NDC would you consider to be your running mate? And he quickly said, Bagben is there, Haruna is there. So I can pick any of them. Once Haruna's name is mentioned, he becomes a threat to John Mahama. Get rid of him so that he doesn't become the running mate. If he has an ambition to become the running mate, then obviously he will go against me. These are things that are being discussed among the NDC. Okay. And we hear this every day. But nonetheless, the party under 7 and the processes of selecting leaders to represent us in parliament. Some people had questioned that parliament should have or clothed with the capacity enough to be able to select its own leaders. But the party is in there, that the national party can write to parliament and select its leadership for them.
These are your standing orders.
Yes, I'm making reference.
I'm coming. Standing orders of the Parliament of Ghana.
Of Ghana, that's right.
Revised 1st November 2000. I'll come to the 2013 one.
That's
now, 2000. It says, who is a minority leader or majority leader? It says minority leader means a member of parliament designated by the party, and party starts with capital P.
Yeah.
Having the largest numerical strength in parliament other than the party that has formed the government as a recognized leader of all the minority groups in the house. So in this, your standing orders, the decision was a party decision.
Right.
But you have revised it. That revision has not yet been adopted.
Exactly.
But in law, what is progressive is what we normally like to do with.
Exactly.
And in that one, you have said that the minority leader is the one designated by the party and or the caucus.
Exactly.
So is it not fair that their demand that there ought to have been consultation?
I'm not taking away anything.
Should have taken place.
You see, where we are, okay, who Haruna Idrisu is, and Parliament, having been a minority, I haven't seen a minority leader being reshuffled the way it's been done. So it is fair to consult. Like Muntaka just said, that they've not been consulted. The party is saying they've consulted them. They've even had meetings with them. But the people involved are saying that they have not. So who is telling us the truth? And he says that he wished that somebody owns up to say that I've been sent to you to come and talk to you about these matters. So for me, this is an NDC.
There are many other members who have confirmed that they were not consulted.
They were not consulted. So clearly, I think this was a coup, just as you described it. It's an internal coup of the NDC. And it goes, I mean, people have made public pronouncement even before. Like my good friend, Okujetua Blakwa, has said, anybody who attempts to contest John Mahama is a waste of time and all that, which is preemptive, which is not correct, it's not democratic. So it goes to suggest that they are trying to protect John Mahama for the elections. So any supposed dissent view, they have to clamp down on that view. And exactly what they've done.
But Haruna is not against Mahama.
But when he's been tipped to be a running mate, he needs to support the one who becomes a flag bearer to make him a running mate. You get that? When Haruna, he took a demonstration from his constituency, as is happening today, to be brought into John Mahama's government. When former President Mahama took office, he took a demonstration from his constituency. That why was he left out of government? He was a communications minister. When he came, he took him off communication. But that's the prerogative of the president.
Right.
But he took demonstrations from Tamale South to get him into government.
All right.
So these are antecedents that we can add to the discussion.
Right. Dr. Thierry Champong, the party has issued a number of statements, and they are urging calm. The petition that the opposing group has taken to the Council of Elders to intervene and to do something, they say they have received it and they are taking steps and so on. Meanwhile, they should all exercise, restraint. What do you say about how this is being conducted and the potential impact, if any, on the chances of the NDC in the 2024 elections?
Yeah, I think there are question marks on the process, and I must say that I don't know enough about NDC internal politics and all of that. But clearly, from the statements and from the posturing and from the things that we've seen, it looks as though there was not enough consultation on that process or with that process. I think Haruna, Muntaka, and Aveji, looking or from where I sit, they've actually performed creditably well, right, as the leadership of the minority in actually holding government to account. There were question marks about what this hung parliament would mean for the country. And I recall there were even conversations about there might be some potential horse trading and things like that. But I think by and large, they've been able to hold the government to account, and the quality of governance from the parliamentary side of things has actually improved with this 137, split house each. So for them to be reshuffled then tells perhaps some of us that there are other factors or considerations at play, and not necessarily because of their the work that they're doing in Parliament and for the party. That's sort of how I'm reading it. But clearly, you can see that the process of that change has not been managed well, and the pushback of all of that, or the ripple effect, of course, could potentially have some impact on the party's chances. But it's too early in the day to pontificate to what extent that, if any, would impact the party's chances come 2024.
Well, Suleiman Haruna has such a massive support in the northern region, particularly in his constituency. And he's been winning consistently on the 70 plus, percentage mark. And people say if his constituency executives are issuing threats that this is not the way to treat, our man, it could have some consequences. And if the rumors and the speculations about, personal interests, leading this are true, then these cracks will be there in 2024.
Well, Samson, I honestly think that the process that has been used for this has been very, very abysmal. There is no doubt that once the party has elected its leaders, the leadership of the party, whether it's the National Executive Council, the Functional Executive Committee, Council of Elders, whatever the composition of the leadership of the party is, that group has a responsibility in managing the entire affairs of the party. When you look at the NDC constitution, I think it was adopted in Kumasi in 2014. I don't know if there have been some amendments, but this is something that I found on the party's website. It lists the parliamentary group as an organ within the party. And therefore, in terms of its management, who becomes the leader and all of that, is a decision by the party. So I think that constitutionally, as far as the party constitution is concerned, nobody can, fault the national executives. But if you have somebody who has been your leader for the last 5 to 6 years as minority leader and minority chief whip, I think that you ought to treat them with some dignity, because the way it's been done, when I saw it, Haruna is going, this person is going, well, it's a decision by the party. But I was quite surprised to learn later that this was just simply done as an instruction or a communication to the speaker saying this is what the party has done without consultations within the caucus of the party in Parliament. And from all the reactions, it's quite clear. If you look at somebody like Honorable Cletus Amoka, he's one of the most experienced people in Parliament. He's been a majority leader before. And so you can't take his views on matters like these for granted. Plus, you talk about the popularity of the minority leader, the minority chief whip. In 2020, for example, Haruna had John Mahama had 68.41% in Tamale South, and Haruna had 73%. In terms of real figures, Haruna had 12,108 more votes than John Mahama in his constituency. If you take Honorable Muntaka, John Mahama got 57.16 and Honorable Muntaka had 66.36. In terms of actual figures, Honorable Muntaka had 14,199 more votes than John Mahama in the Asamase constituency.
And that's a shaky constituency.
Yes, in his constituency. And this is Ashanti region. So certainly these are not people that one would say, oh, well, they are smart, they have enough parliamentary experience, they are liked by their caucus members and all of that. But even in terms of their constituencies, and if you follow politics in Ghana, you no doubt have heard that when it comes to the northern region, Haruna just doesn't command his constituency. In fact, within the NDC caucus, it is said that, look, if you are contesting in any constituency within the northern region and you don't have the backing or support of Haruna, you are not going to make it. And there have been a lot of instances that people can point to.
So Sule, because of what you're saying, in these circumstances, this is a current that he should be swimming along to keep his pedigree and the future that the generality of the Ghanaian public, including President Akufo-Addo, projects that he will get into in the governance of this country, rather than fight it. Because if he does, then he could, shoot himself in the foot. You don't think so?
Well, I agree with you. And up until now, I don't think that I would take any reaction that I've heard from the outgoing minority leader as constituting a fight back. I believe that the circumstances in which he was ousted, if it were you and I, we can't, it is difficult to simply just keep quiet, because to do so, a lot of allegations will come up. Oh, they say Haruna was doing this. Oh, they say Haruna might be in bed with this, and so on. So at least he needs to be heard. And I don't think that he's made the point that whether you like it or not, I have the support of my caucus in parliament and I'm going to stay on.
Okay.
So I think it's basically a reaction that I believe is justified.
All right.
And so far, that is certainly not going to undermine the...
Okay, let's see what the Council of Elders do. They say they are going to be expeditious about the request, to look into the matter for what has happened. Yes, Kofi, we have just a couple of minutes to go.
2 minutes.
Well, there's nothing to say apart from to deny the speculations from all these persons. In any case, one, John Mahama as chairman of economic management team, the resource is out there, it's clear. Single-digit inflation for the longest time we have ever had, growth rate of 14% GDP growth rate, and many other interventions. As president, he handed over this country debt to GDP at 56%. Inflation was at 9.5%. Interest rates were lower than we are experiencing today. So his record, when it comes to management of economy, please, when you were talking, I kept quiet. Vis-a-vis that of this government is there to see. So he's talked about economists, or what have you, have answered him.
You don't belong to the 70 plus MPs who are against the procedure.
Haruna, there has not been, what they are talking about is not a procedure that we have ever used. The biggest platform of the party is the National Congress. Honorable Haruna spoke at the Congress. He addressed His Excellency John Dramani Mahama as presumptive leader. He is one person who had been calling for an early conference to elect a flag bearer. He wished we are not doing it in May. He wished we could have done it earlier. So John Mahama could have the authority as leader of the party to prosecute his agenda. So anyone who comes to peddle falsehood here, that Haruna is against His Excellency John Dramani Mahama, is false. Finally,
time is up.
The constitution of the party and our standing orders are really very clear. And I think that call for consultation. If you ask them, who were they to consult with? I have been told that the persons exiting were engaged.
Okay. Well, they have a different view.
So it is others, they themselves have not come to tell us that they were not engaged.
Thank you very much, my guest, for this morning on Newsfile. This is your most authoritative news analysis platform, and it's brought to you by Bank of Africa, MTN, Ashesi University, Robert and Sons Optical Services, My Way Insurance, St. Thomas Eye Care. And some breaking news that we are learning is that in the matter of the Capital Bank case, William Atu Asian has filed an appeal against the decision because he's not happy that he will be brought to be put into, as it were, jail or face custodial sentence if he's not able to pay the sums in the manner that he's required to pay. As you know, he was to pay 90 million. He already paid 30 million, and he's required by the 28th of April, 28th of April 2023, to make another 20 million payment. Among his arguments, we understand, is that the economy is in such a situation that the existing economic circumstances can be basis for a reasonable, explanation not to warrant an automatic imprisonment if he is not able to pay the money in the time that it is required. So that's the breaking news, that there is an appeal against the decision that he submitted to himself. This show is brought to you by Habil Scruter, and that's my outfit. And you can find Habil Scruter at Adringano Gate, East Legon. You can call them 0200 84 1988. My guests have been Kofi Adams, MP Buem, and member Public Accounts, Defense and Interior Committees of Parliament. Sylvester Tete is MP Botiano, English Yamanfro, and Vice Chairman, Communication Committee of Parliament. Suleiman Ibrahima is Executive Director, Media Foundation for West Africa. Dr. Theo Champong is economist and political risk analyst. Earlier, we spoke to Senyor Husi, convener, Individual Bondholders Forum. I'm Samson, Lardy, Anyenini. Have a good afternoon.